talk about these different topics. So I will talk about religion, partly about a little bit about my research, my PhD project in Nepal, and I will talk about the cultural transmission of honor concepts and the aspects of honor from a cognitive and evolutionary perspective. So, just to mention a little bit about my background here, I've been published my research. If someone is interested in general culture and cognition, well, I've written about the transfer of religious substance. I've written about good death belief that is involved in various religious practice, and particularly in pilgrim journeys. And you can read it in Method and Theory and Study of Religion. I've written about religious dreams and dreaming from a cognitive and evolutionary perspective in religion, and I have written about the cognition of a religious hardship experience, and that is published in the Newman Journal. And this year I published the article Evolved Cognition and Honor Concepts in the Journal of Cognition and Culture, and most of my presentation today will draw from this article. Yeah, so my presentation will first mention a little bit about my research in Nepal, and I've done, as I said, ethnographical research in Nepal on Hindu pilgrimage, where I visited various sites in Nepal and Tibetan Himalayas. Mostly I've done field work here in Nordin, Annapurna region. It's a high altitude pilgrim site. In Pasupatinath here in Kathmandu area, and Mount Kailash and Manas Road in western Tibet. Muktinath is a high altitude Hindu site for Vaishnava, mostly Vaishnava pilgrims, and Buddhists also actually, so it's a sort of a mixed pilgrim site. Pasupatinath is an urban pilgrim site for mostly Hindu Shivite pilgrims. And Mount Kailash and Manas Road in high altitude Tibet is a high altitude site for Hindu, Shivites, Jains, Buddhist and Bumpu shamanistic religion. So it's almost a syncretistic pilgrim sites where it's a blend of various traditions. So one reason why pilgrims do journeys is because they have a dream, and some want to experience a dream during their pilgrim journeys, or they have a dream incubation at the pilgrim sites. So it's often the dream in pilgrim journey has to do with the dreamer's concern about the future and about their own health in the future. Like, if, for example, they want to cure cancer or other illness. So we may describe from a cognitive perspective, we may describe a pilgrim journey as a ritual interaction with culturally postulated, counterintuitive, supernatural agents. At least that is what I'm trying to argue in my dissertation. Another important aspect here is that most pilgrims journeys that we see world around are permeated by supernatural agent concept that have a constitutive role and a pragmatic function to play in pilgrim journeys. So what do I mean by this? I mean that pilgrims identify places of pilgrimage through reference to various types of supernatural agents. So the belief in ritual efficiency, the benefits of merits and hardship and efforts, fulfillment of vows, atonement of sin, the assurance of good death at pilgrim sites, all these assume the presence of supernatural agent concepts. Furthermore, pilgrim journeys seems to involve a flow of substance that believers think is sort of permeated with supernatural agency. And there is a transfer of evil and blessed substance that is seems to be based on ideas of psychological essentialism and contagious cognition in medical communication. So substance that brings blessings along with divine agency provide, and this is important, it provides ritual instruments and supernatural causality during pilgrim journeys. And what it seems to be a special thing about pilgrim journeys is that they sort of create a supernatural immediacy effect in pilgrims. And that this may explain why people think that there is something special about the pilgrim site, that there is something special about the objects that comes from pilgrim sites, and all this kind of specialness notion seems to come from supernatural immediacy ideas, that there's sort of a more supernatural presence at pilgrim sites. So in pilgrim journeys we see a lot of transfer of various kinds of substance. When pilgrims travel to sacred sites, and I would argue that we can see this almost the world around, so it's almost a universal phenomenon, pilgrim journeys, is that they transfer defiled or so-called evil substance to pilgrim sites, and they bring it to the site and deposit it there. It could be like old clothes, it could be hair, and various kinds of leftovers, pictures of dead ancestors and so on. And they usually leave this at the pilgrim sites, where it usually will be sort of consumed or eaten by these very supernatural agents that is supposed to be there. And vice versa, there is a transfer of blessed substance traveling from the site. And we can see this in the various institutions of pilgrims collecting sacred waters, and this we can see, I think, in Islamic pilgrimage also, and in Christian pilgrimage. Various items, sacred water, jol, is believed to carry sort of a blessed substance with a divine agent inside it. So, and in this Himalayan pilgrimages, particularly saligram fossils, it is believed to be sort of an instant of the god Vishnu. So in carrying this kind of fossils, they believe that this can be used as ritual instrument, and it is the sort of active component in ritual actions that must be, in order for the ritual to function, they must have this kind of fossils. So therefore it's important to go on pilgrim journeys to bring home this kind of ritual instrument. So as I said, it provides ritual instrument and supernatural causality. That is, in order to have a working, functioning ritual instrument, it needs to be connected to supernatural causality. And the pilgrim site provides this kind of supernatural causality. So Shraddha and Saligram Puja is just two cultural types of rituals where we can find this kind of supernatural causality. Furthermore, beliefs in benefits and merits of hardship and the effort involved in pilgrimage often refer to various ideas of supernatural justice, and this of course draws on proclivity for general justice and social exchange intuition. That is, pilgrims feel that during the journey they suffer a lot of hardship and so on, and just because of this there's a belief that the journey will provide them merits and a divine intervention that will bring them to heaven, and probably this is closely connected to the exposure to hardship. So during pilgrim journeys we see a lot of ideas about hardship and suffering, and even if they never been exposed to this kind of hardship, as we see on these pictures, interviewing pilgrims like in Kathmandu area, they will spontaneously think that they've gone through a lot of hardship just being in a queue line to the temple. This will lead them anyway to think that they've gone through a lot of hardship experience, and of course this will immediately lead to the idea that, oh, this is a meritorious action, it will give us divine benefits and stuff like this. It will bring me maybe a job later on, and maybe I will find my kid that has been lost for several years and so on. So hardship ideas is closer related to this notion that the pilgrim journey will provide divine benefits to the pilgrim. Okay, so my research in cognitive anthropology draws from what could be called the standard model of cognitive science of religion. So this is sort of the broad, mostly spread ideas among contemporary scholars in anthropology and the study of religion, that is inspired by the naturalistic program that lean on cognitive research and evolutionary research. So here the idea is that belief in supernatural agent causation for salient events. Just draw on ordinary human proclivities to explain events in terms of action motives and intentions of ordinary humans. So this is, we apply this on the idea of supernatural agent causation. So furthermore, supernatural agent concept that we see the world around, they are optimal in cultural transmission because they are very salient. The salience, their inferential rich capacity, and they have what we now call counterintuitive properties. Furthermore,
what do you mean by counterintuitive properties? And why is that making them less good in spreading, give them a high chance of being spread? If they are counterintuitive, you would imagine that they are not so easily adopted.
Yeah, that is a whole lecture.
You can take that later on.
Yeah, I think it's best because we need to talk about reflective cognition and intuitive cognition. It will lead into a lot of discussion. Actually, it's quite controversial in cognitive science already, and to what extent we have counterintuitive agents. But the basic idea would be that a counterintuitive agent is thought appealing to the believer because it breaks or transfers basic assumptions about what an agent is. So, for example, a statue is an agent. So here we have intuitively we know that a statue is a solid object of stone or metal and so on, and we usually spontaneously think that this kind of statue does not have agency. It can't see through solid brick, it can't fly and stuff like that. So in that sense it breaks ordinary biological or social intuition about how proper objects should behave. And because it breaks these kind of assumptions, it easily get sort of easily get communicated and remembered in social communication. Therefore, that is the argument anyway, at least, that it will easily be spread in cultural communication because it's so thought appealing, because it breaks basic assumptions about how these objects should behave actually. So it's a lot of discussions about is this reasonable, but anyway, this is sort of, at least it is the way the argument goes in cognitive science. So furthermore, not just the quality of supernatural agents that we see in the world around, it is that they also have strategic information about people's lives and well-being. And furthermore, supernatural agents are thought to be moral arbitrators in human concern. So that explains why they also are important to us, not just counterintuitive. And furthermore, supernatural agents are believed to have the capacity to interfere with and influence human affairs, and they are considered to provide relevant and likely explanations of salient events. So, for example, when I mentioned that hardship experience is important to pilgrimage, it seems that pilgrims think that, oh, I'm exposed to hardship experience, it's because the god or the gods want to expose me to trial here because I've done some mischief, I have done something wrong before, and therefore I can sort of amend my sins and balance. And in this sense, various types of salient events always are likely to be explained from the perspective of counterintuitive properties in supernatural agents. At least this is what the standard model would argue. Yeah. So, furthermore, I'm not going to talk more about cognitive science and religion so much. I will come into it later on when I try to use it partly on one aspect of bonour concepts, and that is the alleged, or at least the assumed sacred aspect of bonour concepts. So I'll come into religion later on. So just a background here, as Jen said, I'm into what we could call forensic anthropology, and So therefore I've been involved in research supported by the Swedish crime victim fund here, and this involves issues such as mapping the knowledge about honor among policemen. So that is, what kind of schematic assumptions do they have about honor and honor violence, the knowledge among prosecutors, and alleged honor traits in crime investigations. And for the moment, what kind of experience among particularly female honor victims do we find in protected custody, etc. And also, what kind of experience do they have from and what happened? Can they return to their families and so on, or are they completely sort of cut off from the family? That is also the cause of this kind of honor violence.
I have a question.
Yes.
Honor is well known as a male property in the mafia and in dueling, and you have one picture and so on. Is there also a female honor concept? I mean, not in the victims now, but in the perpetrators of crime and so on?
That's an excellent question. I will actually come into this.
You will, okay.
I would say I cannot actually give a good answer to that. I would say that there is something comparable to there is, of course, some kind of a rank cognition among you, female context, in female group, of course, because honor seems basically to be about the rank.
About?
Ranking.
Ranking, yeah.
Yeah. So I will come to that later on here. So, honor and Luna's affair. In many cultures, then, people value the importance of honor and related rules and behavior. And anthropological description seems to point to, of course, anthropological description points to a cultural variation of honor concepts. And of course, there seems to be different types of honor codes, and as Jens already said, there may be different kind of cultural model of honor. And in an article by Roy Danrad, he points to various cultural models or schemas of honor that define the world around. So actually, there is no example of a female honor code here. I would really like to see that, of course, because it would be very interesting. But this is mostly about a male domain, at least in Roy Danrad's perspective. So first of all, there seems to be a common. What we see the world around is a tough guy code. And in the tough guy code, we see that tough guys measure social rank by various types of repeated agonistic competition that establish a pecking order, and displaying and validating toughness is here very important to conform rank. So we see this in various types of prisoner contexts in jail and so on. And this is often shown or indicated by various types of mafia tattoos and insignias that display that they belong to a given gang or group. We also see it in biker gangs, of course. And we heard a lot about the violence that is directed to those who sort of cheat on their own group and tell the police that there is some criminal activities in the group. So we see honor codes in biker gangs, of course, also. We have the wise guy code, and this is of course seen then in mafia culture, such as Yakuza and Dangitar, Cosa Nostra and Camorra. And the mafiosi are organized into what we could call a predatory business enterprises or families that demand respect from other clients and others. What is important here is that disrespect on part of other mafiosi is equal to a declaration of war, and this is why it's so lethal to the insults in this context. So, and here again is the how in this kind of types of honor groups, like in Yakuza, you need to display your commitment to the honor group by cutting the finger. So this phenomenon, the social insignias and symbols, is very common in honor contexts, of course. Another honor model is the model of nobility, and this is usually seen among knights and those kind of machismo context seen for like 500 or 1,000 years ago. And here honor can be gained by or regained by heroic battles and ritualized combat. So we see it's close. It's very close to ritualized behavior here. You can ritualize combat in order to regain honor. So even defeats in hostile encounters here don't mean a total loss of rank actually. And we can see that in the context of royalty to a king, a lord or king. We could mean lead to suicide actually, as we see in seppuku in the samurai suicide, if the noble lost his honor. We also see another kinds of nobility code here in the competition between ancient kings like Agamemnon and Achilles in the Iliad is also an example of the nobilities fighting for preserving their honor. And of course, dueling, as was mentioned here before, this is what Gothenburg calls the gentleman model. It was common in Europe and the United States from the 17th century to the 19th century, and it's connected to this upper class ideas of a gentleman that was associated with good birth, manners, and fine taste. And again, we see the ritualized behavior here when a gentleman was insulted. Rules and ritualized procedures stipulated how to restore that honor. And a ritual insult would dishonor and force the offender to agree to duel with the deadly weapons. Another type of honor that is common is military honor. And honor codes here are common among high-rank militaries, and the honor virtues stress the importance of being reliable and honor, the strong commitment to the unit, a willingness to face death in battle. And again here, honor code is signaled by insignias and some symbols such as medals gained from battle and service. And we can go on like this. It's seen like in soccer context also when you gain glory by winning the championship and earning various types of symbols. Of course, in more extended sense, we find military honor and honor in warfare, like for example during First World War, the Battle of Verdun, where almost 1 million casualties were involved in one of the most bloodiest battles. What we see here is that one reason for the enormous losses on both sides was a French military gospel based on the attack to access, and this is closely related to honor notions. Furious counterattack and never giving up land in the spirit of Bergson's Elan Vital meant that they always should attack the trenches. Every inch of land must be defended to the death of being regained by immediate counterattack with loss, whatever the cost. This strategy, absurd strategy, was enforced by threat of disgrace, dishonor, and court-martial. So this is the price of Verdun for the price of glory. It's also seen, of course, in Somme and all various battle sites during the First World War. Okay. Finally, we have sexual honor. That actually is the type of honor that we recognize today in mass media and the honor killing and so on. And honor here is an issue for the whole family, clan, or lineage. It's based on sexual purity and chastity of a woman or family. And also, actually, fear of homosexuality seems to be part of this concern. And protection of sexual purity is a reputational concern that relates to issues about uncompromised wives or daughters, sisters, and the concern is that they are assets in marriage alliances usually and guarantors of patrilineal descent. So this is important. And also important is the publicly disputed purity of daughters or wives that may, or particularly daughters that make them unattractive for marriage alliances. This is an example of taking measures when family honors is at risk. French soccer star Zinedine Zidane's headbutt to Materazzi after he insulted the reputation of his sister, Zidane's sister, during the finals in the World Cup Championships. You've seen all this?
He insulted the reputation, not the sister.
The reputation, sorry.
It's interesting.
Yeah. That's correct.
It said so. So I mean, but it's an interesting concept to me.
So every year, honor killing based on the notion of sexual purity harvest around 5,000 female victims world around. So some pictures of Indian honor killing. We also have, in Swedish context, approximately 11 or 12 honor killings, and of course the paradigmatic case is the Swedish-Kurdish immigrant Fadime. She was killed by her father in 2002, and it drew a lot of media attention, and it was very politicized discussion. What is honor killing? Should we explain it in cultural terms, or should we explain it like due to patriarchal oppression and stuff like this? So it caused a lot of debate in the Swedish mass media. Another famous case is actually the killing of a male, and it was the Swedish Afghan immigrant Abbas, who was gruesomely killed by his wife's brother. It was a ritualized and very gruesome and bloody killing of Abbas 2005. I've gone through that criminal report, and it's not a pleasant reading. Okay, so what is honor?
I have a question again here.
Yeah.
In the time of Alexander the Great, I think homosexuality was no obstacle to honor.
No.
But it seems to have become so later. Why is that?
I don't know. But, it's a very good question.
Well, I think the Romans had some problems with it.
Did they?
Yeah, but they could accept during certain times that you had a power position, but it was not, I think it was something that you in principle could be punished for, but in reality they didn't always.
Open homosexuality maybe wasn't allowed, but in the hidden maybe it was okay. Or
In Greece?
yeah.
In Greece, Plato actually
Displaying your
praises it, so I must have been more or less accepted openly. I don't know about Rome. It could have become less accepted in Rome.
That's a good point. Right, so honor is a right, has been described as a right to be treated with respect and as having a certain socially exclusive value. So it's a right to be treated with respect and having a certain socially exclusive value. And in order to retain honor, a person must comply with certain rules and maintain a standard known as a code of honor. And an honor group constitutes a community that follows a similar code of honor and acknowledge one another as doing so. Cultural institution and honor is also an important point to make. The code of honor implies that people believe there is something special about the honorous person, and not just any set of rules and standards. It's not just like drinking coffee. We have to treat the honorable person or the honorable daughters with certain respect. So it's a kind of institutional aspect of honor ideas. So honor is an institution that people recognize and accept that certain persons, event or thing must be treated in certain ways because of an assumed objective or natural property over that person, thing, or event. Or at least this is the idea of Roy Dandrav, and he basically draw on Searle's idea of institution here. This leads me to a detour here. Institution from a perspective of naturalized ontology could be understood as without assuming any non-naturalistic entities or domain of reality from an individual beliefs, event, and cognition. Like I said, so that's defended. And furthermore, institutions should be seen as social mechanisms that include the causes for self-maintenance, regulation, self-reproduction. Maybe this level of the institutional level of honor notions could be an explanation why they reproduce culturally. At least that is what I'm thinking. Furthermore, honor seems to be a sacred value, as I said in the beginning, and now I will try to reconnect to the issue of religion that I've talked about before. So it has been said to be kind of sacred value. This is obvious from the concern about female purity and virginity, the cult of virgins. Actually, they should be virgins. The daughters, the females should be preserve their virginity until marriage. Otherwise, the family will lose their honor, and there is always something sacred in this kind of female purity and virginity. Furthermore, religious observances are crucial in upholding honor, such as traveling to Mecca on Hajj or Islamic pilgrimage. Furthermore, honor seems to connect to various folk notions about sacred order or religious folk concept of reality, such as the Hindu Dharma, Sharia law, the Word of God, etc., that we find in Christian traditions. So here the idea of world order is maintained by righteousness, authority, integrity, and border keeping of traditional and religious groups. So, just trying to characterize sacred values here. Sacred values could be seen as a kind of intrinsic and deontic rather than instrumental, and the moral value that guide action is disconnected from concrete material goals or confirmation of rational gain, and its sacred value becomes particularly salient for people when they are challenged or denied, and this is what we often see in contexts where people are dishonored. And researchers such as Scott Atran and he will even argue that this is what we see when people are led into various types of terroristic terror attacks in the Middle East and so on. They have been dishonored because they have been dispelled from their land and so on, and therefore they are led to preserve their honor and motivated to terroristic acts.
Can I question? Moral values and so on, you say that you related on your values, but the majority of these problems generally based on lack of knowledge, and many in the society and groups that have uneducated and so on in these patterns. I mean that if you move to another neighbor societies that have more information, more knowledge and so on, we cannot see this.
Yeah, but still the idea there in those contexts where they so-called are uneducated is a kind of sacred idea that this is a value that we can't bargain with. We must defend this value, this honor value of exclusive right and exclusive respect. So that is the point actually with the sacredness of this kind of values. People are not willing to bargain their honor.
I mean, this is not.
I'm not arguing against the point that it might be people that are uneducated, but on the other hand, there are people that are uneducated also celebrate honors. So there may be counter examples of that, but it's a different issue actually whether the educational level and the sacredness of honor values, I would say.
It's more like lack of choices than lack of knowledge. And you feel that you don't
have
any
maybe
choice.
actually conformism and social pressure. Yes. So sacred values imply a kind of constitutive incommensurability, and sacred values also seem to trade off with other values such as economic gains and offers. So it's difficult to say that, oh, you've been dishonored, here you have $10 and this will solve will make you less dishonored again. So according to, at least to Scott Atran and Axel Rod, apology is much more, that you recognize the dishonored is much more important than just offering another value that is economic offer and so on. So to recognize that someone has been dishonored is much more important. At least in like Middle East the conflict scene in the Middle East. Right. So sacred value relates also to taboos, of course, and thresholds and contamination and various types of purity concerns that has been in hot topics among cultural anthropologists like Mary Douglas, and this seems to render sacred values inferentially rich and suitable for cultural transmission. That is, they're more easily spread because of this. Furthermore, research suggests that people find it harder to avoid thinking about taboo topics, and this would maybe indicate a transmission advantage in sacred imagery such as honor concepts. Right. So, just trying to outline some general model here, how we can explain or what kind of foundation we should use in explaining the prevalence of cultural or honor concepts. So the prevalence of honor concept seems to require an understanding of what factors underpins the cultural transmission of honor concepts, values, and behavior. And there seems to be at least two prominent cultural selectionist approaches involved here that are relevant to the subject matter, and it is the dual inheritance theory that was presented, among others, by Boyd and Richardson, and the other is called the cultural epidemiology approach that is defended by Dan Speber and Scott Atran and other cultural anthropologists. I shall mainly talk about how we can sketch an account from the cultural epidemiologist perspective, and how we can explain the honor concept from that perspective. So, according to this model, honor depends on partly institutional arrangements and public information, that is cues of gossip and reputation, and this seems to dramatically enlarge the cultural prevalence of honor concepts and the distribution of honor concepts. But this condition also engages in a mutual causal change with mental representation that must be underpinned by various cognitive systems that are more stable. So certain human cognitive capacities are likely to exert a significant selective pressure on the cultural transmission of honor concepts. The cultural transmission of honor concepts seems to be underpinned by actually a set of evolved cognitive mechanisms. They seem to be about psychological essentialism, disgust and contamination, sexual dimorphic psychology, kinship psychology, and social cooperation that involves reputation monitoring, commitment signaling, coalition psychology, and moral emotion about shame and stigma. And actually, arguably, all types of honor seems to be connected to cognition about social cooperation and male formidability. But it is only in the sexual honor type that connects to kinship psychology. So, like for example, mafia honor and wise guy honor hardly recruit intuition about kinship psychology, for example. That would be the argument here. So, in most model of honor, we see they seem to recruit or be underpinned by all these types of cognitive systems. At least that is what I would argue. So, just trying to outline this in more detail. Conceptualization of honor seems to draw upon essentialist understanding and according to which humans tend to cognize social categories as a distinct type of biological kind that share an unchangeable essence that is held to be the cause of shared characteristics of that kind. This draws upon psychological research by Nordin and Jill White, etc., etc. And people tend to reify or essentialize institutional roles as being independent of human cognition and decision.
Can we?
Yeah.
Can you try to? I think I understand it since I'm looked into similar things before. But maybe the first point there could be interesting to understand. If you, I don't know, is it intelligible for everyone? The concept is what do one mean with an essentialist understanding, and how do it affect our?
I will come into how it affects the idea about honor, but you want me to explain?
No, you can wait.
Okay.
But it says unchangeable essence that is held to be the cause of the shared characteristics.
Yeah.
That's.
I thought maybe one could translate it into more ordinary English.
There's a belief there is some kind of hidden property that people usually assume exists there, and then this could be seen also in honor groups. That when people believe that they have this kind of hidden property, and if they lose it, they also lose their honor.
Yeah.
We can continue later with that. So, as I said, problems with threat to honor or that disgrace is a sign of lost essence, that you lose this kind of assumed. It's just an assumption that people have. It's not that the essence exists actually. It's basically an empty assumption that there's something, some kind of essence that explains the manifest honor of group or a kind. That is the point. But when people lose their honor, it's also believed that they lose their essence, and they become a non-member of a given social kind or a category. And this, of course, has perhaps it has critical social effects on the trust of those kind of or reliance of those kind of categories. And in sexual honor, contagious and polluting association can turn into a stigmatized essence change, and this is basically what I said above, that the essence will change, and for example females lose their reputed virginity or fidelity, and this affects the whole family. What I'm saying here is that commonly among humans that are strongly defenders of the idea of honor, they think that if we lose the honor, we lose everything. So once lost, you can never regain it, so to say. And it's seen in various novels by Joseph Conrad, for example.
But is that true? What about the idea of revenge?
Yeah, but perhaps it's a mixed intuition now. You believe that you lose your honor permanently, but still there are other types of countermeasures anyway. But still the idea is that you lose it forever.
Really? I thought that by revenging you regain your honor.
Yeah, exactly. But what I'm saying here is that in some contexts there is also the belief that you lose it forever. So it's a confusing situation here.
And I think revenge is a traditional action.
Yeah, of course. There's a lot of cultural tactics to regain honor, but there is a saying that is prevalent, that once lost, it is always lost. So this is always before people start to engage in countermeasures to restore their honor. So the belief that it will be lost forever is still there. So that I'm not making this up. It's seen in various expressions all around that. Like, for example, in Joseph Conrad's Lord Jim, he says like, it's about like, I lost my honor, I can never regain it, and stuff like this. And he can never face his those who he took on the boat to Patna, because he believes that he's lost his honor permanently. So I cannot explain why it is like this. I'm just pointing to the fact that there exists, of course, like you say, tactics to regain honor, but also there is a belief that it's permanently lost. And the belief that it's permanently lost, of course, draws upon these ideas of essentialist understanding. At least I would argue that.
No, I disagree. I think that there are probably two different ideas here then, because there's another strong tradition that you regain honor by revenge, and that I think is also compatible with an essentialist idea. It means that you are victorious, that you are top dog. Then
of course, I'm not against that idea. Right. So another aspect of cognitive systems that seem to underpin this cultural distribution of honor concept is sexual dimorphic psychology and formidability. And this is the idea that a constitutive component of masculine identity is formidability and its various manifestations. So a higher degree of formidability may increase the benefits of male individuals, and individual formidability is usually supported and combined with coalition-driven formidability, and the advantage of such support is an important selection pressure. Individual and coalition-driven formidability is expressed and enhanced in the registration of honorable or glorious index valid among in-group members. I've shown this before, you know, in like tattoos and cutting off the fingers and so on. It's examples, types of glorious indexes that exist in honor groups. So the point here is that loss of honor is potentially a threat to the benefits of individual and coalition-driven formidability. Another system that seems to underpin the prevalence of cultural concepts, at least in sexual honor, sexual honor is here defined by female chastity, where daughters and sisters are seen as assets in marriage alliances and guarantors of patrilineal descent. It is essentially a woman in reproductive age, so that chaperone, wheeled and confined, and the degree of prostration seems to increase with the level of social status. Risk of cuckoldry renders a selective environment of parental uncertainty that should have evolved cognitive mechanism for male protectiveness, anti-cuckold strategies, and mechanism for offspring discrimination. So perhaps male jealousy is an adaptation to avoid such a cuckoldry tactics among females. So adultery is furthermore the most common cause of divorce in many societies, and spousal homicides and honor violence. Men in honor culture often disfavor marriage with dishonored women and seem to sink their so-called alleged honor market value. Another aspect of kinship psychology is the idea of parental investment. In human reproduction and parental investments, trade-offs are involved between parenting and mating and related male, female, and parent offspring conflicts. So parental investment is probably an evolved reproductive strategy geared towards the social well-being of the offspring in order to improve the future social competitive advantage of the children and their reproductive advantages. Such an evolved psychological mechanism should be sensitive to local cues about the offspring's ability to convert parental investment into future reproductive success.
Local cues, or by that you mean some which might be culturally coded?
Yes, exactly. Local cultural norms and expectations and behavioral practice and so on. So honor-related protectiveness is likely to arise from cues of the intensity of competition and one's own value in the local cultural environment among rivals and marital options. So the cost of dishonored offspring, that is often daughters, are rejected or unbeneficial marriages for the afflicted woman and the sisters, and damage to the family reputation in the management of coalitions. Finally, one important aspect that seems to underpin the cultural transmission and prevalence of honor concept is the fact that we are social, we are engaged in social cooperation, and a lot of this social cooperation involves reputation management. So in honor, the threat of a ruined reputation causes costly fights over seemingly trivial matters in order to uphold a public standing. For example, some of you have probably seen or read the novel The Duelist by Joseph Conrad, and it's about two officers that exactly are involved in this kind of seemingly trivial offences, and they are dueling for almost 20 years, and they never succeed in killing each other. So finally they agree to stop dueling over this kind of trivial honor assault. So they meet, actually they fight with pistols and sabers or swords all over the Europe in Russia, and they never actually succeed in killing each other. So this just because of, they actually don't remember the insult from the beginning. They don't know why they're fighting.
But that is even evident in tribal societies.
Yes, I think so.
Even practically.
Yeah. So what just to make a parenthesis here, what can we do about this kind of excess of honor ideas? Some people suggest that one strategy to sort of put a needle into the balloon here, to this inflated notion of honor, is to make a mock of it, to use humor actually. So humor may be a strategy to make fun of this inflated notion. So this might be, yeah.
No, sorry, but wouldn't that be a risk of creating two different societal groups? The people who are making fun of the honor concept and the people who believe in the honor concept, who are completely then, that would separate society into very clear.
Yes.
And that could create even more conflict.
It could, yeah.
Or pretty, I mean, we've seen that quite recently in modern society on how certain jokes on religious, not necessarily honor concepts.
I totally agree with you, but I would say that one aspect of convincing deep believers in, so to say, deep believers in honor concept is that pointing to the ridiculous aspects of it. I think that is will cause a strong motivational force on them to point to the ridiculous side of it. But of course, it can divide the societies in various groups. That one group laugh at the other one, and it will not affect the other group.
But you said that it's also based on the counterintuitive grounds.
That
so
is
it's actually hard to...
That is the idea of supernatural agent concept. Counterintuitiveness, the property of counterintuitiveness has nothing to do with honor. It is the idea, or that is the assumption we find in people's notion of various types of supernatural agent concepts, like ancestors, ghosts, gods, that can fly, that is statues flying in the wind, invisible spirits and stuff like that. That is counterintuitiveness. So it actually has nothing to do with this issue. The only connection, as far as I know, between honor and various types of religious notions is the idea of sacred values.
It also connects racism, racial trends, like in Hinduism.
Yes.
Which is a basically religious belief that some people are higher than others, and it's not social only.
No.
So religion does connect sometimes.
Yeah, indirectly, yeah. And the belief in authority, of course, is closely tied to religious authority, and it's also tied to the respect of elders, and that is closely connected to honor, of course. Yeah.
But I have a question.
Yes.
Let's say you wanted to do a pilot study on the Hells Angels and try your idea of humor. How would you do it?
I would maybe show them a film with like pointing out to ridiculous aspects of bikers beating up each other in an absurdly extended way. Perhaps that would be one tactic, one strategy to do that research.
To exaggerate their practices.
Just to point out to the absurdity of it. That would be like pointing to the enormous extent to which they want to preserve their honor, for example.
You'll have to exaggerate it because in normal conditions they
Yeah, but that is what we do in humor, actually. We exaggerate. That is one property of humor making, I suppose.
But that is the funny part of it. It's hard to exaggerate your practices.
But don't you miss the more practical or social part of belonging to a group and the benefits it brings and so on? I mean, you don't really need to believe in the honor of Helsenius, for example. You can still be part of Helsenius and act accordingly, just to gain the trust of your fellow bikers and so on.
Yeah. Well, I suppose your point is that in groups of Hells Angels members, not all are equally involved in honor notions.
No, or they don't really believe in that. For example, Helsenius have a certain honor to upheld. They just believe in that they're better off in the group than outside the group.
Yeah, and your point would be that
it's not so much about believing in honor or feeling that they have lost honor or something. That's just more a practical thing, that they know that they are benefiting from being part of this group.
I'm not disagreeing with you. Of course, I think the point here would be that in groups like, for example, Hells Angels, the amount and the importance of specific honor notions is much more rampant and much more important than equal or other groups in the society. So it's much more important. It will not be among all members in the group, but among most statistically, I would say, in those groups and the criminal groups, that the honor is much more important than sort of among common people.
Yeah, it could
but
be,
you find also honor concepts among ordinary people, of course, like in the Swedish law, ärkekränk. Yeah, so just to how much? So as I said, social cooperation is one aspect of that seems to underpin the cultural prevalence of honor concept. So good reputation is also an important social asset in indirect reciprocity and maintenance of higher level cooperation. And this means that if other people don't directly have met you or a person, but they know from rumors and gossip that this is a dishonored person, people are not likely, are not so interested in getting into communication or cooperation with you. And this would be a serious problem for those who defend their public honor. So Sommerfeld and others have demonstrated that managing a good reputation in cooperative behavior is met with reward in future interaction, both in the individual's own and in other groups. And it seems that humans know that their behavior will be recognized in future social situations, and they use this for strategic reputation investment when the chances of payoff is high in other situations. Yeah, so this again leads to the problem of bad reputation and dishonor and stigmatization. So the cue about stigmatized person or dishonored person seems to be underpinned by an automatic social judgment designed to help humans avoid social exchange partner with seemingly poor, unfavorable properties, and arguably fear of bad reputation in dishonor draws upon intuition of social exclusion and being disfavored as a social exchange partner. Okay, you want to hear more? Okay. So, just to continue here.
But before we do this, we have two words in Swedish. heder och ära.
Yeah.
They're not exactly the same, and both are possible translations of honor.
Yes.
What's your reflection on that? Ära is closer to glory, probably, and to reputation.
Yeah.
You cannot have.
It's an intriguing question. I spontaneously I don't have anything to say about it more than that the various labels people use to describe these ranking ideas, of course, points to different cultural concepts, and like irid and like namus and sharif. There are different kinds of honor concept that we see in Middle East and they're partly overlapping, of course, like this is family resemblance here. So I think glory is a tricky concept. I think it's interesting, but I don't know. I really would like to dig more into it, but I cannot say if there's a sort of strong folk connection in the idea about ära, that it is closely connected to glory.
Ära is more connected to reputation, I think.
Yeah.
I think you can have heder without having any reputation.
That would be to say like ära is the same as anseende.
Well, good anseende.
Yeah.
It's more. It has a positive evaluation more than anseende.
But having gott anseende is not always the same as ära.
No, because the ära has to do somehow with struggle and so on, I think.
Yeah, and royalty and divinity, and it's more like a sacred notion, I would say.
Yeah.
Det heter hedersmord, inte äromord.
Nej, det borde egentligen heta äromord kanske.
Men det heter it's called ärekränkning.
It should have been called, I think, äromord. It would have been better. Hedersmord, I think, is a bad translation for English.
It is an important discussion, of course.
Yeah.
So I will now talk briefly a little bit about the connection between honor, reputation, and morality, and the idea of evolved morality. That is, and respect is constituted in honor, since it refers to reputation, and the view others take of the respected person. So reputation is not merely an expression of a personal opinion, but it's rather a further meta-statement of that opinion, that the opinion is congruent with shared opinion among others in the social environment. That is. So reputation seems to be a kind of social cognitive artifact that regulates and controls personal autonomy. Having a bad reputation would sort of limit your ability to communicate and navigate in the social environment. That would be the point, I suppose, by saying that reputation can't regulate and control personal autonomy. As seen from the context of honor, it is socially crucial to have competence and skills enabling prediction of the reputational consequences of one's actions. So people seem to have almost a natural tendency to preserve their ära or honor or reputation. And humans must have the capability to foresee others' responses to one's own behavior and attitude, and how others respond to our response. This leads to the issue of cooperation. Social cooperation may always imply the risk of cheating and taking benefits without paying the costs. And cheating or violation of local cultural norms may threaten the person's reputation and consequently the chances of being able to gain for future cooperation with others. How do reputation and honor concepts match with the presupposition that evolution and selection has equipped human beings with moral dispositions? Studies by Haley and Fessler, for example, suggest that cues of eyes being watched or certain social sounds were implicitly processed as social signals to safeguard one's reputation, and this leading to more generous behavior among the participants. So from this perspective, seemingly moral behavior is rather a concern for one's own behavior. Is there a broader moral domain, we may ask? So social interaction can be seen from a perspective of a broader and seemingly evolved moral domain that involves other types of moral concern, referring to harm and care, fairness and reciprocity, in-group loyalty, authority and respect, and purity and sanctity, at least as has been suggested by Hyatt and Graham. So from the perspective of fairness and reciprocity and in-group loyalty, human moral disposition for cooperation seems to involve both altruism and mutualism. And altruism and mutualism seem to be part of the broader domain and correspond mainly to in-group loyalty, fairness and reciprocity respectively. So altruist and generally about altruist and moralist evolutionary theory. The evolution of morality can be seen from, as I said before, from the general perspective of human cooperation. Cooperation always implies the risk of cheating and taking benefits without paying the costs. And cheating or violating local cultural norms may threaten the person's reputation and the chance of being able to gain from future cooperation. Evolutionary theories can be classified as either altruist or mutualist, and mutualist approaches seems to predict different solutions between reputation and morality, and that's why I'm talking about them here. In the perspective of altruist perspective, behavior can be seen as altruistic when it is costly to the actor and beneficial to the recipient. And altruism, seen as strong reciprocity, is a disposition to cooperate with others and to punish others who violate standards of cooperation at personal costs. So how does this connect to reputation and honor? In honor group selection, in altruist group selection approaches, honor concepts are a kind of moral disposition or attitude that relates to punishment that suggests the greater reproductive success of altruist in the group. Groups with a strong commitment and also honor them, reciprocity and eagerness to punish defectors seems to outcompete groups with weaker commitment and no punishment. Bad reputation and bad that is dishonor seems to be from this perspective at least, seems to be a strong cue for non-cooperation that can produce punishment, since uncooperative group members are likely to receive social punishment. Some few words about how we can dispute this account in the altruist account. And it draws partly upon Kirstman's suggestion that seemingly moral behavior seen in altruism is rather driven by non-moral self-interest, particularly when there are cues of being observed in the context of dubious cheating behavior. Mutualist perspective on the other hand perhaps might have a closer connection to what we see in reputation and honor. Behavior here can be seen as mutualistic when it's beneficial to both the actor and the recipient. There are two different types of mutualistic perspectives. The partner choice version, where individual choose the right optimal cooperative partner, as in a market setting, and is less concerned about the detecting of various cheaters. And we have the partner control version, which concerns governing cheaters in cooperation and how to respond to cheater and restore cooperation. So the partner control version is focusing on punishment, basically. Mutualist scholars are usually inspired by evolutionary psychology and stress that the psychological motivation for moral behavior and cooperation is rather self-interest in upholding a good reputation and being included in social exchange. So moral behavior evolved in this way and function to furnish individuals with a reputation as a reliable partner of cooperation.
Men det här är inte vad altruisterna tycker om.
Nix.
Nej. Men det här tycker jag negligerar den svenska distinktionen och även engelska distinktionen mellan skuld och skam. Som i sin tur kan relateras till distinktionen mellan ära och heder. Så då kan man alltså säga att ära hör ihop med skam och skuld hör ihop med heder. Och man behöver ingen gott rykte eller så för att ha heder och sona sin skuld. Däremot behöver man det när det gäller skam, för det har att göra med rykte och så vidare.
Yeah, it's a famous discussion in the context of honor, the connection between shame and guilt, and the connection between shame culture and honor culture, shame and guilt culture.
Yeah.
But you said one thing there about...
I'm saying that guilt goes together with ära, which is more, it's honor, glory, glorious honor or something. And heder, which is honor then, more individual honor, behaving ethically, goes together with guilt, and shame goes together with...
Yeah, you're probably correct.
Yeah. But here they only seem to stress the social, the reputation line. So that's the shame, honor, glory line.
So here's some limitation of the mutualist perspective. The limitation of the early mutualist theories are revealed in behavioral experiments, demonstrating how participants are willing to punish cheaters even when it is costly for themselves and for no manifest benefits to themselves. Furthermore, punitive attitudes and behavior must speak in favor of altruist theories where individual sacrifice for the group.
Yeah.
So if an individual solely calculates for reputation and moral appearance, he will be mistrusted for these self-serving and calculating motives, and from mutualist perspective actually be disfavored as a cooperative partner. But still, a reputation is crucial for being seen as a trustworthy cooperative partner, social partner. Furthermore, an overly strong concern for manipulating one's reputation by impressing others seems to be costly from a cognitive point of view. Any concern for reputation without moral authenticity might be difficult to uphold, actually. Alright, so how can we connect mutualism to honor? Mutualist model suggests that it is the reputation as a reliable social exchange partner that is at stake in the concern for honor. If an individual solely calculates for reputation and moral appearance, he will be mistrusted for these self-serving and calculating motives, and from a mutualist perspective, it is favored as a cooperative partner. And what about, should we prefer altruism or mutualism in honor, or if you compare these two models? The concern for honor and reputation does not always consist of altruist attitudes where an agent benefits or punish other at his own cost. So this is an obvious fact, actually. The idea of honor and reputation matches in some important way with the mutualist partner choice model, according to which the reputation as a reliable social exchange partner is at stake in the concern for honor. Maybe there is some advantage with the altruist group selection account, and where they account for the successful group of altruists, where honor and reputation are part of other strong commitment signals and norms in successive groups. Thank you. That's all from me. So this was sort of a piled up or mixed various presentations here that you probably could see about honor and my research on cognitive science. Yeah. Questions?
What are you actually going to do? This is just a literature survey. What are you actually going to do?
What I'm doing is I have done a lot of interviews with policemen already. What I'm going to do is, you mean my contemporary applications on honor?
Well, yeah, you can talk about that, or your interviews with policemen. What do you do then? You just ask them different questions about how they look at honor, and then you classify them into...
Yeah.
And what have you found out about policemen?
I've interviewed social welfare workers. I have interviewed policemen, lawyers in one study, and of course there is a different. Mostly social welfare workers and those working at protected custodies, they are the ones who are more skilled and have more cultural background knowledge about honor violence, actually. And among lawyers and among police, the police, there seems to be much more distribution of the knowledge of honor, where some police knows a lot more than others, so the distribution of honor knowledge is much greater there. So there is a huge gap in the knowledge distribution about honor, actually, and there also seems to be a lot of stereotypes in what people believe characterize honor and honor violence. And for example, a common idea is that female cannot be involved in honor violence. They can't be the one who beat up the male or the son and so on, and the kids. So, and of course, this is not the case in like 40 or 30% of the cases I've gone through. Mothers or grandmothers or sisters are also involved directly or indirectly in the honor violence. But this is not what these types of experts actually know about honor violence. So there is a mismatch here between what actually is seen from the cases and what this different expert knows about. Knows about honor violence. There's also a difference in what people think, these experts think, how they think that religion is involved in honor violence. And so this seems to be a highly politicized issue, so that we should not say that religion is involved, we should not say that it has anything to do with culture. And there is a huge sort of difference between various groups here, where some admit or recognize that of course the religion has some kind of indirect responsibility here, whether it's Christianity or Islamic or other traditions. So there's a lack of consensus, actually, both in the causes of honor violence and how it is manifested, actually. So it's a rather fragmented situation, actually, in what the Swedish society knows and how they sort of model and believe about honor. So it's important to try to compare it with the more general and cross-cultural research on honor. It's also actually the case that among most experts, whether they are social welfare workers, policemen, and so on, they don't see honor as a kind of an idea that has to do with the right to be treated with respect. It's usually not the kind of idea that is involving police and social welfare workers. They usually think that it has to do with culture in some way. It has to do with tradition in some way. So it's a very vague notion about culture, about honor. That is. Many policemen and lawyers are uneasy to talk about honor because they don't want to be charged of being racists or prejudiced and having stereotypes. So they're offering a written version of what they should say from manuals in the police force and so on.
Are you concerned yourself about this issue for your own work?
Pardon?
Are you concerned with this issue for your own work?
Yes. Yes, of course.
But I thought you were also going to ask the police about their own ideas of honor, but you're not. You're only asking them about their ideas.
I'm referring to previous research.
Yeah, but, okay, but I'm interested in what is the notion of honor for the Swedish police?
There is no agreed upon notion about honor. There's a split notion.
What is an honorable policeman?
I don't know what they think an honorable policeman
Because
is.
you haven't asked them that. You've only asked them about their idea of honor crimes.
Yeah, because that has some implication for how they are conducting their work with the victims of honor violence. And that
Oh, I think asking them what an honorable policeman is would have even more implications. That would be direct. Well, that's what governs their behavior.
Pardon?
That's what directly. If I ask you what's an honorable scientist,
Yeah.
that's going to govern your behavior. If I ask you what's an honorable policeman, that's going to govern the behavior of the policeman.
Yeah.
So I would ask them that. Why not ask them that?
Yeah, it's a good point actually. But it leaves the question whether the police are using the idea of an honorable person in each and every aspect of their sort of police virtue, their conduct of police work. Maybe actually it's an empirical question, I suppose as well. It would be interesting to go into if they have some sort of a code of honor, personal honor, or from the police force that they use and translate into how they treat and judge and consider foreign culture, people from foreign cultures with honor aspect. And actually, some of those I meet and discuss with seems to have this kind of fairly reasonable ideas about honor, why they do that. They can understand why they would need to defend the family honor and so on. But usually I would say that among these kinds of experts, the more they have worked with cases, the longer they have been through it. But the more cases, by that I mean like maybe 100 cases a year and so on. The more, the better knowledge they, of course, have of what that this has to do with honor and so on. So those who the problem in the police force, for example, is that they come into what is called familjevåldsenheten, and in the familjevåldsenheten, this is the unit where they have the investigation force alleged or for honor investigations, and they stay in those investigations. They usually stay here for like 2 or 3 years. This means that the knowledge about honor investigation never is accumulated in the environment. So usually there's a sort of a brain drain, or there's no institutional accumulation of knowledge about honor. So basically this means that it is there are some few experts, really skilled experts, like in Stockholm and in Eskilstuna, but there are very few. They are like experienced like 600 cases, and they are brilliant in talking to them. They have a marvelous knowledge about this is about honor. They know exactly what kind of questions. But this types of knowledge is not distributed, and this competence is not distributed among other policemen. They're more using intuitive ideas about this must not be honor, a case of honor violence.
Some of these cases that you said, maybe we can translate to some kind of criminality. I mean, there's the criminal activities, for example, that these many cases as we honor for daughter and so on and so on. The question would be that when you're talking with policemen, you want. In my idea is that you are coming and talking to them, and they know much more about these criminal activities and see that these kinds of activities called honor and so on. This is a criminality, and you try to help them to find these and know and identify these activities and so on. I mean that many of these activities is based on not basis a criminal activities that someone goes on and have some kind of beliefs and the many police people and so on maybe don't know, they cannot realize this one, they cannot find this one. And when you're talking, is the idea that they know more about these activities and can identify. I mean, it's this other cases that you said, this is many other criminal activities that we have in society.
Your point would be?
My point is that when you rely to the police authorities and so on, in my imagination, my translation is that you try to, they know more about these kind of activities, criminal activities that we have in society. This is that we call them this one, we call someone kill another one, but this one is a kind of activity we call the family.
I think I'm. The point is that, the thing is that there is no. We call it in English. There's no criminal label for honor violence. It's the label used in when you report crimes is murder. It's beating up someone, but there is no label, criminal label, when you report violence and other types of incidents that refers to honor, basically. So this means that any violence that refers or has honor as a motive, perhaps it will not be recognized actually in the investigations, because basically people will report it as this is violence. It's beating up their wife. It's burning them in the face. It is abducting the daughters and taking them to Lebanon. But the motive for this is something completely different. It's not mentioned in the report actually. So this means that very often the reports of honor cases will not be recognized. It will easily be forgotten. And why is this important then? It is important because we need, or the police need to have different tactics to handle cases of honor, because they are not so likely to be involved in criminal interviews, the victims of honor violence. But and when the police start to get involved, the relatives to the family will immediately do various types of countermeasures, and they will threat the victim, and the whole family will gather up actually against. So the police must act very quickly actually in order to solve the case. But if they don't recognize this and see that this is a case of honor and just treat it as an ordinary case of killing or ordinary case of or wife beating or whatever, they will miss that point, and it might be and probably has serious effects on the victim actually. So that is one aspect why it's important for police to recognize and be culturally skilled in this kind of cultural issues of seeing the proper motives behind this kind of violence.
Do you want to?
No, I had a question relating to what you just answered, so you've already answered it.
Okay.
But I have a comment. It strikes me listening to you that Sweden has been going through for 100 of years, maybe it's a kind of scientization, where some concepts have been purged and are still surviving but unclearly understood. And I think examples are honor, ära och heder in Sweden. So in Sweden, of course, we have another concept which you have not talked about, which is yrkesheder. And so, there would be a professional code of honor for the police, just as there are for many other groups, bankers, accountants, etc. And that's still there, and it has a legal status. We actually do have a legal crime in Sweden related. You mentioned it yourself before, ärekränkning. So that there we recognize it, but it seems to be very partially recognized. It's only recognized here and there, and we don't have a total analysis of these concepts, but it seems that it should be part of legal discussion, of sociological discussion to a greater extent than it has been. Because it's being re-entered now through immigrant groups. And you can clearly see how it's related to other concepts like shame and respect.
But actually doesn't, when lawyers tries to what do you call them? Försvarsadvokat?
Defense
lawyers, When the defense lawyers try to defend families that have killed their daughters and so on, beating them up, they usually refers not to ärekränkning. They refer to the right to other clause in the Swedish law, to the right to. I don't remember now actually which part of the Swedish law it is, but it is not the ärekränkning part of the law. It's more about the clause about the family's right to conduct blah blah blah. Anyway, my point is it's not ärekränkning that is used actually in the defense actually, and they could have used that.
But maybe it's a cultural fact about modern Sweden. It is a cultural
factor. You're completely right. And actually, the Swedish philosopher Torbjörn Tännsjö, he's making a point of this in a recent book, that Sweden is one of the countries that actually has a strong, still has this idea of a notion that can be used, and it is an honor concept actually that is used in the Swedish law. And this is almost similar to what we find there are cultural prevalent ideas in the justice system that is preserve various honor practices, and we can see that in the killing of Pele in Kurdistan in Iraq. When she was killed 10 years ago by her fathers and brothers and uncles, they did not get any severe punishment for that, because it was said in their law, in the Iraqi law, that this is an honorable case. So it was less hard. It was less, what do you say in English? It was less förmildrande omständigheter.
Ameliorating circumstance.
Right, and you see this also in the South states of America. Actually, it's been a lot of studies on the prevalence of violence in the South states of America, like in Texas and so on, and the willingness to respond with violence in cases of offenses, and that the justice system is more willing to excuse this kind of violence when honor is involved, rather than other types of violence. So there are cultural aspects here, institutionalized code in the justice system that seems to encourage almost this practice. And also what we see is that who is usually the killer in the cases of honor killing. It is mostly and this is usually what the family knows when they kill son or their daughter. It is that usually young people below the age of 18 that will not get so severe punishment in jail, so they will just be in jail for like 1 or 2 years. So they will recruit young people, young guys usually in the family to kill the target. So the young boy will be in prison for like 1 or 2 years, then he's released. And this is important. This guy, he's not expelled, or he's celebrated as a hero in the family. He's not treated as a criminal. He's more like a hero, so the relatives will applaud him because he restored the family honor. And this is very different from common violence, and like wife beating and wife killing, where the social environment will think that this is a crazy guy or this is a bad guy. But in honor killing, it is completely different. Here the social environment, the family will celebrate the killer. Yes.
What do you think is not a solution, but what are you hoping that your research will contribute with or to?
Well, so far my research contribute to show the distribution of knowledge about honor in the various arenas or experts like social welfare workers, police, and so on. That there is no consensus about honor here. And there is a difference between the various experts, and there's also a difference between what the more academic research say about honor and the sort of expert, the canonized expert knowledge about honor. But it would also be interesting to see if there are actually different notions, and this is not what I've done recently, but Jens suggested here, if there is a sort of a code of honor connected to the police corps and other, among other groups of experts, does that in some way translate into how they treat cases of sexual honor violence? That would be very interesting to see. I never thought about it actually, but of course, yeah. At least it would lead them to be more sensitive to the motives that it's involved in these cases. They might be more sensitive to identify motives and why people do this and that way.
But maybe even more in relation to gang wars.
Yeah, yes, of course. Yeah.
Because, I mean, male policemen surely have some of the same macho ideas themselves.
Yes.
I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah.
So there, I think there's a more direct connection that you could look at.
Yeah, I think I almost implied that.
Yeah.
But in the way the cultural distribution or the cultural transmission of honor concept seems to rely on various psychological or evolved systems that encourage honor notions. And of course, a machismo environment like firemen or police corps, they involve such a honor notion.
Yeah.
That is why the parade and so on in New York City and celebrate their own honor by glorious indexes and insignias, of course. And they gain honor by solving cases and like in the military, they gain medals and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Right. Any questions?
If you get money, what are you going to do?
I will continue this work and basically, what is the name of domare?
Judge.
Judges, yeah. What is knowledge among judges? There's been no research on how judges treat honor cases in the Swedish context. So, and what we know from other cases not involving honor violence is that there's a lot of lack of cultural background knowledge here. So they use rather intuitive judgment on how to consider these issues. So looking into how judges consider the importance of honor motives is one thing I'm going to look into. And also I will broaden the research I've already done and interview a broader span of informants actually to see how affected the police corps, police environment is by this uneven distribution of knowledge about honor. So that is what I try to continue doing research. But also I would like to do research on more general theoretical approach on altruism and mutualism and in connection to reputation more generally.
It was actually part of the project application.
Yeah, I'm involved with
yes.
agency.
What about the educational policemen? Is this?
It's supposed, yeah, of course. It should be feedbacked into the procedures and manuals of policemen. How they better can treat or solve cases of honor. Trying to find more obvious signs or cues of honor.
But do they do they learn anything about these issues while becoming?
Well, what should be important to do is to offer some kind of easy description of typical honor cases that the police has find easy to use in the regular police work. That would be one way to distribute this research to the police. Also how they differ from like social welfare workers, that they use different kinds of knowledge about or assumption about honor. And this is a problem because there is a whole link of institution that honor victim usually travels through. They first come to the school and they meet the nurses there, the psychologists there, the therapists there, and then they come to the social welfare workers. Then they come to the police, and there's a whole link of institutional involvement that affects the victim here. And of course, if these different institutions have different idea of what is going on here, different ideas about what is knowledge, that will of course severely affect the willingness of the victim to talk about their problem. What we find, what I have found is that they are not very interested in talking about what they go through. That is the victims. In trying to reach honor victims, it is extremely difficult to get them to talk. And this is when I ask those who want to talk about their experience, they say that, oh, I've been through a lot of problems with the social welfare workers or the police and so on, and I don't want to talk about this anymore. And, so it's shameful for them. They don't want to be reminded of it. And of course, some people do want to talk about it, but most of them find it's very uneasy for them. And if they have been exposed a lot to various institutions that wants to, that is another aspect actually. if for example, if I take an interview with a Alban girl from Albania that is a victim of honor violence, she might even not know what honor is about. Or this is it's more like they will say that, oh, I cannot do what I want and I'm forced to do certain things. So this is sort of the entry description for them to be classified as an honor case among the social welfare workers or other institutions, that they are forced to do certain things according to the family practice, to the family traditions and so on, and they don't want it themselves. And then when they come to the social institutions of various kind, they are taught a Swedish standard model of what honor is about. So this is a patriarchal, collectivistic culture you've grown up with, and they learn this more or less. So sometimes when you take interviews with this, it's almost like they're repeating, they're reading directly from the book. It's very funny. I mean, it's obviously not their own idea, so the family's idea about it. They're reading directly from the Swedish. Some of the Swedish standard version from Länsstyrelsen and so on, what honor is about. It's quite fun actually. So this is a very messy problem actually, methodologically. Since what is the native notion about honor? They're basically repeating the kind of honor notion that some Swedish authority has learned there. And then you need to be careful, and you need to ask them like more sensitive cultural questions about namus, and you need to hint that you have some familiarity with the cultural expressions or the labels used if they're from Afghanistan or if they're from, like for example, using phrases that they are used and so on. But that does not always work, of course. And of course, using interpreters here and so on is very important. Next research, I would really need much more Arabic-speaking interpreters. It really limited my research this time. I could only have interviews with Swedish-speaking and English-speaking interviews.
Okay, I think we have to stop, but thank you very much again. Now we can only